When you see a billionaire buy one of those multi-million-dollar mega yachts, you just assume it floats.
Right. You assume the basics are covered.
Exactly. You don't ask if they remembered to build the hull. You look at the helipad, the golden pool, the sleek aerodynamic design, and you just think, wow, that is an unstoppable machine.
Yeah, the sheer amount of money spent implies like a baseline of functionality. You assume that someone, somewhere in the engineering department, made sure the thing wouldn't just straight up sink the moment it hit open water.
But what if you looked under the waterline and realized, wait, there is no hull?
Just dead weight.
It's just solid gold weights, totally unaerodynamic, actively dragging the whole thing down to the bottom of the ocean.
Well, welcome back to our deep dive. Today, we are looking straight past the glitz and the glamour to unpack the hidden structural and cultural crises at Real Madrid.
Heading into the third season of this, frankly, bizarre sporting project. Right. And our mission today is to look past the names on the back of the shirts. We're getting into the glaring tactical incompatibilities, the massive defensive holes, and some truly toxic dressing room dynamics. We want to show you why a roster full of the world's most expensive players is functionally broken.
Functionally broken is, it's the perfect way to frame this. Because the prevailing narrative around this club right now focuses entirely on the sheer volume of talent, right?
Yeah.
You look at this squad on paper and you see an unstoppable collection of Galacticos.
But the reality is completely different.
Totally different. What they've actually built is a Frankenstein hierarchy. They've assembled a team of highly paid, completely autonomous stars. And in doing so, they've created a tactical black hole that might actually be, impossible for any manager to fix.
It's a fascinating, well, almost tragic, honestly, case study in how not to build a modern football team.
Yeah.
And to understand the root cause of this entire tactical breakdown, you have to start at the top of the pitch, because that's where the most money is spent, and critically, that is where the power dynamics of the entire club are set.
Let's get right into that power dynamic, because the club has essentially created this, massive leadership vacuum.
Take Vinicius.
Right, Vinicius. He was just handed the biggest contract renewal in the club's entire history.
Which is wild.
On a surface level, you think, okay, star player, big contract, that's just how elite football works.
Yeah.
But look at the context. This essentially gave him a pure do-whatever-you-want status, coming right off the back of a season that ended with him essentially getting a coach fired.
Yeah, that contract renewal is the exact moment this Frankenstein hierarchy really comes to life. By handing him that deal right after a chaotic, disruptive season, the front office sent a very clear message to the rest of the dressing room.
And what's the message?
The message is there are absolutely no consequences for your actions if you sell enough shirts.
Exactly.
The club validated the behavior. They essentially told him, hey, performance and collective discipline, those are secondary to your individual star power.
Which completely undermines whoever is sitting in the manager's chair.
Yeah.
How do you enforce discipline after that?
You can't.
And then they double down. They bring in Mbappé, the most expensive signing in the team's history. And look at his behavior between March and May of last season.
Oh, it was astonishing.
He essentially checked out entirely. He felt alienated by the dressing room. He was furious about the firing of the previous coach, and he made absolutely no secret of his displeasure regarding Mourinho's arrival as manager.
And that psychological checkout, it manifested physically on the pitch. We are talking about a player who has become a complete statistical outlier in modern football when it comes to his lack of work rate off the ball.
He is, without a doubt, the laziest forward in recent memory when it comes to defensive duties.
Yeah.
He simply does not track back. He doesn't press. He literally puts his hands on his hips and watches the game happen without him when the opposition has the ball.
But wait, let me push back on this a little bit.
Go ahead.
Because toxic egos and, lazy superstars, they aren't exactly a new invention in football. Surely at some point, world-class talent just figures out how to share the ball and win games, right? It's like a startup hiring 3 visionary CEOs, but refusing to hire any coders. It's stupid, but sometimes the sheer talent forces a win. We've seen teams win major trophies with players who refuse to defend.
Well, you're right that it's not a new phenomenon. But you have to look at the actual math of modern football. This is where the concept of the autonomous player becomes, absolutely critical.
Right. Explain the autonomous player concept for the audience.
So an autonomous player is a superstar who's given a free pass from the collective defensive structure. A team like Argentina or, France a few years ago, they can absolutely survive and win a World Cup with one autonomous player.
Like a Messi.
Like a Messi or an early Mbappé who doesn't track back. The other 10 players adapt. They form a cohesive block behind him to compensate for his resting.
Right. But Real Madrid doesn't have one autonomous player?
No, they don't.
They have two, maybe three, occupying the exact same spaces.
Exactly. Having 2 or 3 autonomous forwards completely breaks the modern game's basic requirement for a pressing structure. If 3 guys at the top of the pitch are just walking around when the other team has the ball, you aren't just playing with a numerical disadvantage.
Right.
You are playing a fundamentally different sport than your opponent.
Right.
You cannot compensate for 3 missing players in a modern Champions League knockout match.
Yeah.
The geometry of the pitch simply won't allow it.
Which brings us to the really tragic collateral damage of this entire setup, and that is Jude Bellingham.
Oh, man.
He is stuck right in the middle of this absolute mess, acting like a tiger in a cage. Vinicius and Mbappé are crowding his exact attacking zones, completely neutering his impact.
It's agonizing to watch.
Right. He can't play his ideal role, and he certainly can't display that dominant, driving leadership we constantly see him show for the England national team. He's trapped trying to balance an equation that is mathematically unbalanceable.
He's a generational talent being reduced to a tactical band-aid. Bellingham wants to drive forward, he wants to dictate play, he wants to crash the penalty box. But when the 2 guys ahead of him are occupying all of his preferred spaces...
And refusing to do the dirty work.
Exactly. Because they refuse to press, Bellingham is forced to compromise his entire game just to keep the team's structure from totally collapsing. He's essentially playing with a 50-pound weighted vest on.
So if Bellingham is suffocating and Vinicius and Mbappe are stranded up top, just, walking around, the opposition can casually walk the ball to the halfway line without any resistance.
0 resistance.
The only people who can stop that progression are the defenders, which means this tactical breakdown up top isn't just an attacking issue. It directly causes a massive physical breakdown at the back.
It crashes like a tidal wave onto the defensive line.
Right.
You cannot look at this club's defensive crisis in isolation. It is a direct, undeniable symptom of the forward line's ego. And when you look at the personnel actually anchoring that defense right now,
it is a parade of structural red flags.
It's terrifying. Multiple coaches, Ancelotti, Xabi Alonso, and now Mourinho, have desperately pleaded with the front office to fix the center back situation.
Begged them.
And they've been completely ignored.
Well, let's break down exactly what they have to work with, because the contrast between the fullbacks and the center backs is wild.
Yeah, let's get into the names.
The fullbacks are somewhat stable. You've got Cuckoo on the left and Federico Valverde filling in on the right alongside Trent Alexander-Arnold. But the center of that defense is an absolute unmitigated disaster.
Well, let's actually start with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Valverde on the right, because that dynamic actually exacerbates the center back problem.
Oh, totally.
Trent is arguably the best attacking fullback of his generation, right? But he pushes incredibly high up the pitch. That leaves a massive pocket of empty space behind him.
And Valverde covers it.
Right, Valverde, who has this incredible inhuman stamina, drops in to cover that space. But that means Valverde is no longer in the midfield. It creates this vicious domino effect where the right center back has to shift way over to cover the new gaps. And who is that right center back?
Antonio Rudiger.
Antonio Rudiger.
And look, Rudiger right now is physically finished. He simply cannot run backwards anymore. The Spanish tactical term for what he does is recular. Yeah. He drops deep. He backpedals toward his own goal instead of holding a high line. And I want to pause here because we hear about high lines all the time in football analysis, but why is a center back backpedaling such a fatal flaw in this specific system?
Okay, so to survive in elite modern football, a defense has to compress space. When your forwards lose the ball, your center backs need to push up toward the halfway line to suffocate the opponent and force a quick turnover.
Right.
But if Rudiger knows he has lost his recovery pace, his natural survival instinct kicks in. If he pushes up and a ball gets played over the top, he knows he'll lose the foot race. So instead of stepping up, he reculars.
He panics.
He drops 15, 20 yards deeper, dragging the entire defensive line down with him toward his own penalty box.
Which creates a massive canyon of space right in front of him. Okay, so Rudiger is a physical liability in a high-pressing system. You'd think Eder Militao could compensate, right? But his situation just hurts to analyze.
It's tragic.
He's only 28 years old, but his medical profile shows the bone health and physical wear and tear of a 33-year-old. He missed 214 days,
Wow.
came back, and then almost immediately missed another 240 days due to a fibrillar tear and multiple muscular injuries.
I mean, the psychological toll of that injury cycle is unimaginable. You spend nearly a year in a lonely rehab room. You finally get back on the pitch. You play maybe 3 good games. You spark hope that you are finally back to your old self.
Yeah.
And then your body just shatters again.
It breaks you.
It completely martyrs a player mentally. You simply cannot build a reliable Champions League winning defensive foundation around a player whose body is breaking down at a cellular level. You can't trust him to hold a high line because you never know when his hamstring is just going to give out.
So the club gets desperate, they look for alternatives, and they hand Ibrahima Konate a massive contract.
Right.
But he remains highly unreliable due to a string of really poor form and some heavy personal struggles that have clearly bled onto the pitch.
And you really can't overlook the human element there. When a player is dealing with significant off-pitch issues, especially in a merciless pressure cooker like the Santiago Bernabéu, you can't just flip a switch on a Tuesday night and expect him to turn into a brick wall.
Exactly.
The mental focus required to play center back at this elite level is absolute. If your mind is elsewhere for even a second, you will get punished.
Then there's the young prospect, Dean Huijsen. And look, he shows these brilliant high-level flashes, but he makes fatal young player mistakes. He's often compared to Cubarsí in that regard, meaning that on any given day, he can actively accelerate a defeat for his own team by attempting like an incredibly risky pass out of the back and just giving the ball away in the worst possible area.
A manager like Mourinho might be able to develop Huijsen over 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But he is not a solution for winning a must-win game tomorrow. Young center backs need time, patience, and a rock-solid veteran partner to protect them when they inevitably make mistakes.
Which he doesn't have.
He has absolutely none of those things in this current toxic environment.
And rounding out this disastrous depth chart, you have Asensio, who frankly lacks the basic professional attitude required for this league. He doesn't take care of his body and simply lacks the elite quality needed to wear the crest. I mean, it's wild. If everyone from Ancelotti to Mourinho is begging the front office for a reliable center back, why is the board completely ignoring the foundation of the house while buying more expensive chandeliers for the living room?
Because expensive chandeliers sell millions of shirts in Asia and North America, and foundation concrete doesn't.
Wow. Yeah.
But this is the ultimate trap they've built for themselves. Think about the geometry of the pitch we just outlined. You have a defense that is fundamentally incapable of playing a high line because Rudiger is too slow and Militao is broken. So the defense drops deep into their own box.
But you also can't successfully play a deep, compact defensive block because your forwards, Mbappé and Vinicius, absolutely refuse to drop back into their own half to help defend.
That is the impossible paradox. The defense is pinned back at their own 20-yard line by their physical limitations, and the forwards are stuck up at the opponent's 80-yard line by their own massive egos.
Leaving a 60-yard gap.
Exactly. That leaves 60 yards of empty green grass in the dead center of the pitch. An expanse that opposing teams like Manchester City or Bayern Munich can just casually stroll right into. And the players left to cover this mathematically impossible expanse are the midfielders.
Which brings us to the most damaging consequence of this entire Frankenstein setup. The midfield squeeze. It falls on players like Tchouaméni, Valverde, and Camavinga to fix a 60-yard gap.
It's suicidal.
They are being asked to sustain a fundamentally incompatible front line, and it is a tactical death sentence.
It is entirely unsustainable. If a midfielder pushes up to support the forwards in the press, the opponent just chips the ball over their head into the massive space Rudiger left behind. If the midfielder drops deep to protect Rudiger, well, Vinicius and Mbappé are completely isolated up top. These guys are doing 90 minutes of shuttle runs, chasing shadows, desperately trying to plug holes in a sinking ship.
I look at this midfield and I see incredible athletes, but they lack the technical orchestration abilities of like Toni Kroos or a Rodri. Even if you dropped a prime Casemiro into this current setup, and we are talking about one of the greatest defensive midfielders of his generation, he would look entirely useless.
Absolutely useless. Because Casemiro's genius relied on a compact team structure. He operated in a tight 15-yard radius where he could anticipate passes and break up play. If you ask Casemiro to cover 60 yards of open space by himself, he gets exposed instantly.
Right.
And to your point about Kroos and Rodri, players like that can artificially compress a broken team by putting their foot on the ball, slowing the tempo down, and dictating the rhythm. This current crop of midfielders, as dynamic and athletic as they are, they just don't possess that specific metronomic quality. So the game just turns into a chaotic, exhausting track meet.
And here is where the tactical analysis bleeds into human psychology. This impossible frustration on the pitch has created a highly, highly toxic dressing room culture off it. Factions have formed over the firing of the previous coach, and the environment got so bad that two players literally got into a fistfight at the training facility.
I mean, the irony of that fistfight is almost too on the nose, because those two exact players who fought might end up being the most reliable defenders the team has this season. We are looking at a real scenario where Chouameni might have to abandon the midfield entirely and play center back or right back just to plug the structural holes.
Wait, think about the reality of that for a second. You have Mourinho trying to implement a tactical system with two players who just broke each other's faces in the training facility.
It's madness.
How does a manager even hold a film session in that environment? And, well, it gets worse. When Mbappé was away from the team for 2 to 3 weeks with a supposed injury, the rest of the squad openly reported having the best working environment they'd experienced in 2 years.
Incredible.
The team was actively, visibly happier when their most expensive star was physically removed from the building.
It's a manager's absolute worst nightmare. But it proves a fundamental truth about elite team sports. Tactical failure guarantees cultural failure. You cannot separate the two. When you put highly competitive athletes in impossible situations on the pitch, like that ridiculous midfield squeeze resentment, is inevitable.
Because they feel like they are doing all the work for none of the reward.
Exactly. Put yourself in Camavinga or Valverde's shoes. You are running 12 kilometers a game. Your lungs are burning. You are constantly getting bypassed and embarrassed by the opposition because the tactical gap is too big. And then you look 40 yards up the pitch and see Mbappé standing completely still, hands on his hips, watching you suffer. Human nature takes over.
You feel like you're doing his job, your job, and the center back's job while he gets the massive paycheck and all the Ballon d'Or buzz.
Precisely. The lack of hierarchy and discipline at the top directly causes the fistfights at the bottom. When the front office hands out that record-breaking contract to Vinicius despite all the chaos, or brings in an alienated Mbappé to disrupt the ecosystem, they are signaling that the rules simply don't apply to the stars.
Yeah.
They are essentially telling the blue-collar workers in the midfield and defense that their labor is completely undervalued. That structural inequality creates a deeply toxic workplace, whether you're in a regular corporate office building or the Santiago Bernabeu.
It's the Frankenstein monster finally breaking out of the lab and tearing the castle apart brick by brick. And right now, Mourinho is the guy they've hired to stand in front of the door with a broom, hoping he can somehow sweep the monster back inside.
It's an unenviable task. Look, Mourinho thrives on creating siege mentalities, right? And us against the world culture. But how do you create a siege mentality when the players inside the castle are throwing punches at each other and literally celebrating when the king gets injured?
It's an unbelievable situation. And it really reminds you that building a winning team requires so much more than just, collecting the most expensive puzzle pieces on the market. You actually have to make sure the edges fit together. As we've unpacked today, this incompatible, eponymous forward line has created a devastating domino effect. It shattered an already crumbling defense, squeezed an exhausted midfield into an impossible tactical trap, and ultimately bred a deeply toxic work environment.
It totally shatters the underlying assumption of modern squad building. We assume infinite money equals infinite success. But without structural harmony, infinite money just equals infinite complications.
Which leaves you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to ponder as this season unfolds. We are currently in an era of football that is utterly dominated by highly structured, collective, synchronized systems. Think of how the best teams in Europe press as a single living organism where every player knows their exact role. So is it actually possible anymore for a squad built entirely around disconnected, autonomous superstars to win the biggest trophies? Or are we witnessing, in real time, the definitive death of the Galactico team-building model?
I mean, if the yacht doesn't have a hull, all the gold in the world won't keep it from sinking.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Keep your eyes on the waterline, folks. And hey, if you want to keep watching us tear into the tactical reality of this club, make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, and go follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We post the daily rants there. You want to see me lose my mind over Rudiger's positioning in 60-second clips.
Exactly. It's good for your health. Thanks for listening to today's deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.